I never imagined my world could collapse in a single day. For most of my life, I'd been the woman people turned to for advice, for comfort, for a listening ear. My home was always open, the kettle always on, and laughter seemed to echo through every room. I was proud of the life I'd built. My marriage, my children, my small but thriving business. In our little town, my name was synonymous with trust. People would wave as I walked down Main Street, and I'd always have a kind word or a warm smile to offer in return. My family was my anchor. My husband, Mark, and I had weathered our share of storms, but we'd always come out stronger. Our 2 children, Emily and Ben, were my pride and joy. I'd poured my heart into raising them, teaching them the values my own mother had instilled in me: honesty, kindness, and resilience. I felt in so many ways that I was living the life I'd always dreamed of, one filled with purpose, connection, and love. But sometimes happiness makes you blind to the shadows gathering at the edges. That morning started like any other. I was in the kitchen humming to myself as I prepared breakfast, when my phone buzzed with a new message. The sender was unknown and the words were chillingly vague. You think you know the people around you. Be careful who you trust. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I tried to brush it off, probably just a prank, I told myself. But the unease lingered, gnawing at me as I went about my day. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. Later that afternoon, as I stood in the bakery chatting with a longtime customer, the door burst open. In front of a crowd, a voice rang out, loud, accusing, impossible to ignore. Everyone needs to know what she's really like. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. My heart pounded as faces turned toward me, eyes wide with shock and curiosity. In that instant, the life I'd cherished began to unravel, and I realized nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed felt like living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. At first, I tried to convince myself that the accusation in the bakery was just a misunderstanding, a moment of madness that would soon be forgotten. But the looks people gave me told a different story. Where there had once been warmth, I now saw suspicion. Conversations that used to flow so easily now stopped abruptly when I entered the room, replaced by awkward silences and sideways glances. It started small. A neighbor who usually waved from her porch suddenly turned away, pretending to fuss with her flowers. The cashier at the grocery store, who'd always asked about my family, barely met my eyes as she rang up my purchases. Even the parents at the school drop-off, women I'd shared coffee and laughter with for years, seemed to huddle together, their voices dropping to whispers as I approached. I could feel the chill in the air, the invisible wall growing higher with every passing day. I tried to hold my head high, to act as if nothing had changed, but inside I was unraveling. I replayed the scene in the bakery over and over, searching for some clue, some explanation. What had they meant by what she's really like? What were people saying about me? The not knowing was almost worse than the accusation itself. One afternoon, desperate for answers, I stopped by my friend Linda's house. We'd been close for years. She was the godmother to my daughter, the one I called when I needed to vent or share good news. But when she opened the door, her smile was tight, her eyes wary. I tried to laugh it off, to ask if she'd heard anything strange about me lately. She hesitated, then mumbled something about people talking and maybe it's best to keep a low profile for a while. The words stung more than I expected. I left her porch feeling more alone than ever. The rumors seemed to take on a life of their own. I heard snippets in the aisles of the supermarket, saw cryptic posts on social media that I knew were about me. Some people aren't who they pretend to be. You think you know someone. Each word was a tiny cut, and together they left me bleeding. I tried to fight back, to confront the gossip head-on. I posted a heartfelt message online, asking anyone with questions to come to me directly. I called a few friends, hoping to clear the air, but my efforts only seemed to make things worse. People accused me of being defensive, of having something to hide. The more I tried to explain, the more the rumors grew. It was as if I was trapped in quicksand. The harder I struggled, the deeper I sank. The contrast between my old life and this new reality was almost unbearable. I'd always been the one people trusted, the one they confided in. Now I was the subject of their whispers, the cautionary tale they told behind closed doors. My children noticed the change too. Emily came home from school in tears one day, saying her friend's parents didn't want her coming over anymore. Ben grew quiet, retreating into himself. Mark tried to reassure me, but I could see the worry in his eyes. I started to question everything. Had I done something to deserve this? Was there some truth to the things people were saying? The doubt gnawed at me, eroding my confidence, my sense of self. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me in the mirror, tired, anxious, and afraid. But even as I felt myself slipping, a stubborn spark of anger began to burn inside me. I refused to let lies define me. I needed to know where this all started, who was behind it. I began to pay closer attention, to listen for patterns in the gossip, to watch for the person who always seemed to be nearby when the whispers started. And then, one evening, as I was leaving a community meeting, I overheard a conversation that stopped me cold. My own cousin, Sarah, someone I'd trusted with my deepest secrets, was laughing with a group of women repeating the very rumors that had turned my life upside down. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the truth. The betrayal hadn't come from a stranger. It had come from within my own family, but nothing prepared me for who was behind it all. I stood outside the community center, my hands trembling as I tried to process what I just heard. Sarah, my cousin, my confidant, the one who'd stood beside me at my wedding and held my hand through the hardest days of my life, was the one spreading the poison. I wanted to believe I'd misunderstood, that there was some innocent explanation, but the laughter in her voice and the way the others hung on her every word left no room for doubt. That night, I barely slept. Memories of our childhood together flooded my mind. Sleepovers at Grandma's house, secrets whispered under the covers, promises that we'd always have each other's backs. We'd been more like sisters than cousins. I thought of all the times I'd defended her, supported her through her messy divorce, helped her find work when she was struggling. How could she do this to me? The next morning, I called Sarah and asked her to meet me at the park. I needed to look her in the eye to hear her side of the story. She arrived late, sunglasses perched on her nose, her smile a little too bright. We sat on a bench beneath the old oak tree, the same spot where we'd shared so many heart-to-hearts over the years. Sarah, I began, my voice shaking. I heard you last night. I know you've been talking about me. Why? What did I ever do to deserve this? She let out a short, dismissive laugh. You're being dramatic. People talk, that's just how it is. Don't blame me for your problems. I stared at her, searching for a flicker of remorse, but her expression was cold, almost bored. I heard you, Sarah. You were repeating things that aren't true, things that are hurting me, my family, my children. Why would you do that? She shrugged, crossing her arms. Maybe you should ask yourself why people are so quick to believe it. Maybe you're not as perfect as you think you are. Her words hit me like a slap. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, reality warping as she twisted the knife. You know me better than anyone, I whispered. You know I would never. She cut me off, her tone icy. Honestly, I'm tired of always being in your shadow. You act like you're so much better than everyone else. Maybe it's time people saw the real you. For a moment I was speechless. I'd always tried to help Sarah, to lift her up when she was down. But now looking at her, I realized how much resentment she'd been carrying. Flashbacks flickered through my mind, moments I'd brushed off as harmless jealousy, little digs about my perfect life, the way she'd sometimes undermine me in front of others. I'd ignored the warning signs, too eager to believe our bond was unbreakable. I tried to reason with her, to remind her of our shared history, but she only grew more defensive. You're imagining things, she insisted. You're paranoid. Maybe you should talk to someone about that. Gaslighting. The word echoed in my mind, and suddenly I saw it all so clearly. She wanted me to doubt myself, to question my own sanity. The betrayal cut deeper than any rumor ever could. I left the park feeling hollow, my faith in family shattered. I replayed the conversation over and over, wondering if I'd missed some crucial detail, some sign that could have warned me. But the truth was I'd trusted her completely, never once suspecting she could turn on me like this. At home, I tried to hold myself together for my family's sake, but inside I was falling apart. Mark noticed the change in me, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him the full truth, not yet. I felt utterly alone, surrounded by people but isolated by the weight of my shame and confusion. But as the days passed, my pain slowly hardened into resolve. I refused to let Sarah's bitterness define me. I would not let her lies destroy everything I'd built. I didn't know how yet, but I vowed to clear my name, to reclaim my life and my dignity, even if I had to do it all by myself. I had no idea how deep his hatred ran. It's a strange thing, watching your life unravel thread by thread. At first, I tried to keep up appearances, telling myself that if I just acted normal, everything would blow over. But the rumors had taken on a life of their own, growing wilder and more vicious with every retelling. My phone, once a source of comfort and connection, became a device I dreaded. Each new message or missed call filled me with anxiety. Was it another friend turning their back, another accusation I'd have to defend myself against? The first real blow came at work. I'd been with the company for over a decade, building a reputation as someone who could be trusted with anything. But suddenly meetings were held without me. Projects I'd led were reassigned. My boss, who'd always been supportive, called me into his office one morning, his face grave. "I'm sorry, but with everything going on, we have to let you go. It's just too much of a distraction." I sat there numb, barely able to process his words. I wanted to scream that it was all lies, that I'd done nothing wrong, but the look in his eyes told me it wouldn't matter. Losing my job was like losing a piece of myself. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the pride I'd taken in my work, the friendships I'd built, the sense of purpose I'd carried with me every day. Now all of that was gone, replaced by a suffocating sense of shame. The isolation grew worse. Friends I'd known for years stopped returning my calls. Invitations to gatherings dried up. Even at church, people avoided my gaze, their conversations dying as I approached. I could feel the judgment in their eyes, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. My world, once so full of warmth and belonging, had become cold and unfamiliar. The hardest part was watching the doubt creep into my own home. Mark tried to be supportive, but I could see the worry etched on his face, the way he hesitated before asking questions. Emily and Ben grew quieter, their laughter fading. I caught them whispering together, glancing at me with uncertainty. The pain of seeing my own family unsure of me was almost more than I could bear. There were days when I thought about giving up, just letting the rumors win, letting myself fade into the background. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. I felt weak, defeated, a shell of the woman I used to be. But then, one afternoon, as I sat alone in the park, I heard a familiar voice call my name. I turned to see Grace, an old friend I hadn't seen in years. She sat beside me, her eyes kind and understanding. "I don't believe a word of what they're saying," she said quietly. "I know you and I know your heart." Her words broke through the fog of despair. We talked for hours, sharing memories and laughter, and for the first time in weeks I felt a flicker of hope. Grace reminded me of who I was before the lies, before the shame. She told me I was stronger than I realized, that I didn't have to let others define my worth. As the sun set and we parted ways, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. Maybe I'd lost almost everything, but I still had my truth. And with that, I found the strength to keep fighting. But then a glimmer of hope appeared. Grace's visit was the spark I needed. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of purpose, a stubborn resolve rising up from the ashes of my old life. I realized that if I wanted my name back, I couldn't just wait for the truth to come out on its own. I had to go after it. No matter how painful the journey might be, I started by retracing the steps of the rumors, listening more closely to the whispers that had haunted me for so long. I paid attention to who repeated what and when. I noticed that certain details seemed to change depending on who was telling the story, but one thing remained constant. Sarah's name always seemed to be in the background, nudging the narrative along. I decided to confront the lies head-on. I reached out to people who had once been my friends, asking them directly what they'd heard and from whom. Some were hesitant, embarrassed even, but a few opened up. One woman, Karen, admitted that Sarah had shown her proof, screenshots of messages that supposedly came from me, filled with cruel words and gossip about others in our circle. My heart pounded as I asked to see them. When she finally forwarded the screenshots, I stared in disbelief. The words were vile, but the writing style was all wrong. The messages were full of phrases I'd never use, and the timestamps didn't match up with anything I remembered. I dug deeper, searching through my own phone and email records. I found nothing to match the supposed evidence. That's when it hit me. The messages had been faked. Someone had gone to the trouble of forging entire conversations, twisting my words into weapons. The realization made me sick, but it also fueled my determination. If Sarah was willing to go this far, what else had she done? I started keeping a journal, documenting every encounter, every rumor, every piece of so-called evidence. I reached out to a friend of Mark's who worked in IT, asking if he could help me analyze the screenshots. He agreed, and after a few days he confirmed my suspicions. The messages had been doctored, the metadata altered to make it look like they'd come from my phone. The more I uncovered, the more tangled the web became. I learned that Sarah had been quietly sowing seeds of doubt for months, telling people I'd said things behind their backs, that I was jealous of their successes, that I was hiding secrets from my own family. She'd even gone so far as to create fake social media accounts, using them to spread rumors anonymously. The betrayal was staggering, but it also made me realize just how calculated her campaign had been. But I wasn't alone in my search. As word spread that I was fighting back, a few unexpected allies emerged. Karen, racked with guilt, offered to help me clear my name. Grace introduced me to a woman named Denise, who'd been through something similar years before and knew how to spot the signs of manipulation. Together, we started piecing together the puzzle, comparing notes and timelines, looking for patterns in the chaos. It was Denise who first suggested that Sarah's motives might go deeper than jealousy. "Sometimes people lash out because they're afraid," she said. "Maybe there's something she's trying to hide or something she wants that you have." The idea unsettled me, but it also made sense. I remembered little moments: Sarah's envy when I got promoted, her bitterness when her own marriage fell apart, the way she'd always seemed to resent my happiness. As we dug further, we discovered that Sarah had recently applied for a job at my old company and been turned down. She'd blamed me, convinced herself that I'd sabotaged her chances. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. All this pain, all this destruction because of a grudge I hadn't even known existed. The truth was even uglier than I imagined. This wasn't just about rumors or jealousy. It was about revenge, about someone so consumed by bitterness that she was willing to destroy everything in her path. But now, armed with real evidence and the support of a few brave friends, I knew I was closer than ever to exposing the truth, and I was ready for whatever came next. I knew I couldn't keep the truth to myself any longer. The evidence I'd gathered, doctored messages, fake accounts, the timeline of Sarah's bitterness wasn't the whole story, but it was enough to prove that something was deeply wrong. I decided the time had come to confront her, not in private, but in front of the people who mattered most: our family. We gathered at my mother's house for Sunday dinner, a tradition that had always brought us together. The air was thick with tension as I looked around the table, seeing the faces of people I loved, some wary, some confused, some already convinced by Sarah's lies. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to speak. I need to say something, I began, my voice trembling but clear. There have been a lot of rumors about me lately, and I know many of you have heard things that are simply not true. I have proof that some of these stories were fabricated, messages that were faked, accounts that were created just to spread lies. Sarah's eyes narrowed, but she kept her expression carefully neutral. Are you accusing me of something? She asked, her tone icy. I met her gaze, refusing to back down. I know you've been telling people things that aren't true. I know about the fake messages, the anonymous posts. I have friends who are willing to come forward. Why are you doing this, Sarah? What did I ever do to deserve this? She let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. You're unbelievable. You always have to be the victim, don't you? Maybe if you spent less time pretending to be perfect and more time being honest, people wouldn't have so many questions. I could see the doubt flicker in the eyes of my family. My aunt shifted uncomfortably. My uncle looked away. Sarah seized the moment, her voice rising with righteous indignation. You see? This is what she does. She twists everything, makes it all about her. I'm not the only one who's noticed. Maybe it's time we all stopped pretending. The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, accusations flew, and I felt myself shrinking under the weight of their judgment. I tried to explain, to show them the evidence, but Sarah was quick, deflecting every point, turning my words against me. She painted herself as the real victim, the one who'd been maligned and misunderstood. By the end of it, I was left standing alone, my hands shaking, my cheeks burning with humiliation. I could see the uncertainty in my family's eyes, the way they looked at me as if they didn't know who I was anymore. Sarah had won this round, twisting the truth so skillfully that even those who loved me most began to doubt. I left my mother's house that night feeling more alone than ever. The pain of their disbelief was almost too much to bear. But somewhere deep inside, a stubborn ember of determination still burned. I knew I was right. I knew the truth was on my side. I just needed one more piece of evidence, something undeniable, something that would force everyone to see what I already knew. I thought I'd lost everything, but I was about to discover the final piece of the puzzle. The days after that disastrous family dinner were some of the darkest I'd ever known. I moved through my routines like a ghost, haunted by the looks of doubt on my loved ones' faces. I replayed every word, every accusation, wondering if there was anything I could have said or done differently. The weight of despair pressed down on me, threatening to snuff out the last bit of hope I had left. But even in my lowest moments, I couldn't let go of the truth. I kept searching, combing through old emails, messages, and social media posts, desperate for something, anything, that would finally set the record straight. I was running out of time and energy, but I refused to give up. I owed it to myself, to my children, to the life I'd built. One evening, as I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by stacks of notes and printouts, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Denise, the friend Grace had introduced me to. Call me as soon as you can, she wrote. My heart pounded as I dialed her number, hope and fear warring inside me. Denise's voice was urgent. I think I found something. Remember when you said Sarah used your old laptop last year? I remembered that some messaging apps save backups automatically. If she sent anything from your accounts, there might be a record. I raced to the closet and pulled out the dusty laptop, my hands shaking as I powered it on. It took forever to boot up, but finally I was able to access the backup files. I scrolled through the folders, my breath catching as I found a series of audio recordings, files I didn't remember making. With trembling fingers, I clicked on the first one. Sarah's voice filled the room, unmistakable and clear. If people knew what she was really like, they'd never trust her again. I just have to make sure everyone sees the messages. She'll never know what hit her. My heart hammered in my chest as I listened to her lay out her plan, her words dripping with resentment and envy. There was no mistaking her intent. She had orchestrated everything, from the fake messages to the anonymous posts, all to ruin me. Tears streamed down my face as I realized what I was holding. This was it, the undeniable proof I needed. The despair that had threatened to swallow me whole was suddenly replaced by a surge of hope so powerful it left me breathless. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. The truth was finally within my grasp. I spent the next few hours gathering everything: audio files, emails, screenshots, and statements from Karen and Denise. I organized it all into a folder, making sure there could be no doubt about what had happened. As I worked, I felt my strength returning, the old fire in my belly reigniting. I was no longer the victim of Sarah's lies. I was ready to fight for my name, my family, and my future. This was my last chance to reclaim my life. I knew the confrontation ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in months I felt truly ready. The truth was on my side, and I was determined to make sure everyone saw it, no matter what it took. The next family gathering arrived sooner than I expected, a birthday celebration for my mother, with nearly everyone in attendance. My heart pounded as I walked through the door, clutching the folder of evidence like a lifeline. The room quieted as I entered, the tension almost palpable. I could feel the weight of their stares, the silent questions hanging in the air. Sarah was there too, her smile tight, her eyes darting away from mine. I waited until everyone had settled, then stood up, my voice steady but loud enough for all to hear. Before we celebrate, I need to say something important. I know many of you have heard things about me, terrible things. I've tried to defend myself, but words alone haven't been enough. Today I have proof. I opened the folder and began to lay out the evidence, one piece at a time. I played the audio recording, Sarah's voice echoing through the room, her words unmistakable. The shock on everyone's faces was immediate. Some gasped, others covered their mouths in disbelief. I showed the doctored messages, the fake accounts, the timeline of events. I read statements from Karen and Denise, who bravely spoke up about what they'd witnessed. Sarah's face drained of color. She tried to interrupt, to deny, but the evidence was overwhelming. "That's not what it sounds like," she stammered, but no one was listening anymore. The truth was out, and there was no way to twist it this time. The mood in the room shifted in an instant. Where there had been suspicion and distance, there was now outrage, directed not at me but at Sarah. My family and friends turned to me, their eyes filled with regret and apology. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering how sorry she was for ever doubting me. Mark took my hand, his grip strong and reassuring. Even those who had been coldest now offered words of support, their faces full of shame for having believed the worst. For the first time in months, I felt the heavy burden of humiliation lift from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of vindication so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. I stood tall, no longer the subject of whispers but the woman who had fought back and won. But what happened next shocked everyone. In the days that followed, the truth spread quickly, this time not as a whisper but as a wave of relief and vindication. Sarah could no longer hide behind her lies. Family members who had once doubted me now confronted her, demanding answers she couldn't give. She tried to apologize, but the damage was done. My mother, always the peacemaker, insisted on a family meeting where Sarah was asked to explain herself. She broke down, admitting to everything, her voice trembling with regret and shame. There were consequences. Sarah's relationships with the family fractured, and she was asked to step back from gatherings for a while. The community, too, learned the truth. Friends who had turned away reached out with apologies, some in tears, others simply grateful that the nightmare was over. My old job even called, offering me my position back, but I realized I'd outgrown that chapter. I wanted to move forward, not backward. As my reputation was restored, I found myself changed in ways I hadn't expected. The pain and humiliation I'd endured had stripped me down to my core. But in the process, I'd discovered a strength I never knew I had. I learned that standing up for myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. I learned that truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of coming to light if you refuse to give up. I also realized how important it is to trust your instincts, to listen to the quiet voice inside that tells you when something isn't right. I'd spent so long doubting myself, letting others define my worth, but now I knew better. I was stronger than I ever knew, and I would never let anyone take that away from me again. Looking back, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the friends who stood by me, for the lessons I'd learned, and for the chance to rebuild my life on my own terms. I knew there would always be challenges, but I also knew I had the courage to face them head on. And as I moved forward, I carried with me the unshakable belief that no matter how dark things may seem, the truth and your own strength will always find a way to shine through. If there's one thing my story has taught me, it's that the truth is more powerful than any lie, and resilience is born in the darkest moments. No matter how alone or defeated you may feel, never let anyone else define your worth. Stand up for yourself even when your voice shakes. Trust that your strength will carry you through, and that the people who truly matter will see your heart in the end. Betrayal can come from the places we least expect, but it doesn't have to break us. Instead, it can reveal just how courageous and resourceful we really are. I hope my journey reminds you that you are never powerless and that justice, though it may take time, will always find its way. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced betrayal or had to fight for your reputation? How did you find the strength to keep going? Share your story in the comments below. Let's support each other because together, our voices are even stronger.